This evening we'll be cutting the springs on the wagon. Show you how to do that. First things, you want to get it up in the air. Then what you're going to want to do is go ahead and use some PB Blaster or any form of loose juice you got on the sway bar end links here. And up here on the strut nuts on the top, you want to take these out. These are 13 millimeters. So do that. I jack it up, do both fronts at the same time, then back it up on a flat surface and do the rears. Tools you're going to need include, you're going to need a cutoff wheel, and I believe these are 15 millimeters. Yeah, 15 millimeters for the sway bar end links. Get that off of both sides and lift the sway bar up. And then when you have all the nuts out of the top, you can actually push this down and pull this down and out of the strut tower. And then what we're going to do is find the end of the tail of the spring here, which is right over here, right at the rear back here. And that is up one spring. So from the bottom here, up one spring, that would be one coil. I don't count that one, that's a dead coil. But I'm going to go ahead and take 3 total coils. So 1, 2, and up here for 3. So all this that I'm touching is going to go away. It's pretty much going to put the car down on the bump stops. But that's about as low as you can go with these without doing anything, cutting the bump stops or doing shorter strut inserts. So next, I'll be using, these are some spring compressors. These are modified for use. I welded on a lug nut here on the end, so I can put these on and have access with an air gun and just wind these up real quick. When you put these on, after you get the strut assembly drop down, you want to reach up and grab as far up as you can. Make sure you don't grab this coils that you're going to be cutting. And then go ahead and compress these. And make sure to get one on either side. So if you do one here, you want to do one exactly the opposite side. And then you take your whiz wheel and you just zip through. So I'll go ahead and get all that done and show you where you're at. You should be at. Alright, I apologize for the light. Here's how you get on the spring compressors. 13 millimeter bolts, nuts on top here through the strut tower. Make sure you line up. I put a mark on the plate here with a pencil to mark where the alignment pin's at, so when you put it back together, your alignment's proper. Push the strut down through the top. Put your spring compressors on. Try and grab as many coils as you can. Since I'm cutting 3 total coils, this is as far down as I can go with the compressors. So what I'm going to do is take the cutoff wheel and zip it right here first. Then I will zip it over here. This is 3 total coils. Actually, where's the tail? Okay, so the tail's around here in the back. So 1, 2, 3 is around over here. And then to match the other side. So I'll zip it a couple places so I can get the spring out. And then slowly release these back down and pull all the pieces out. Then to get it back together, I use a jack up here on the rotor and line up the studs on the top to shoot through the strut tower and line up the alignment, and you continue to jack it back up until it lines up. Then tighten everything down and swivel the sway bar back down on the link here, end link, and put your nut back on, and then put everything, or your wheels back on, and you're done. as tight as it gets. Now the fun part. Hold that, please. Thanks, sir. Alright. It's a little toasty. Alright, 1, 2, 3. I gotta cut right here. But first, here's all the front coils that came out of the car. I took something like 3 or 3.5 coils on both front springs. So now it's time to do the rear, but here's a shot of the car as it sits. It's got a lot of rake. So the rear is going to come down to match the front. Front's about where I want it. I don't want to go too much lower for a daily driver, but the rear's got to come down a lot. We want to tuck that tire. So I'm going to jack it up and I'll show you the next steps. Once you have the car up in the air, to get out the rear springs, you need to take out this nut right here. It's 15 millimeters. Spray it with some penetrating oil and use some vice grips. The vice grips are used to hold down. There's a little clamping plate that locates and holds the bottom spring to the perch. So you want to clamp that still while you're taking out this nut so the plate doesn't spin around on the perch. Do this to both sides. It might take a helper to pry down or kick down or push down on the wheel and then pull the spring down and out. Then you go ahead and mark where you want to cut it, zip it off, and stick it back in. So yeah, going in is much easier because the spring is so short. In fact, you'll probably have to use I use a stick or a piece of wood like a 2x4 and reach up in here very carefully from the side as someone's jacking or releasing pressure on the jack, and you have to push the springs back on the pockets or back on the upper rubber perches here. So once it's out, I'll show you how many coils are going to come off and then how to put them back in. So here's the rear spring out. And as the same as from the first part here, the front springs, you don't count the dead coil. So from right here until this lip or this edge of the spring here to here, you don't count that. So the first coil that you're actually taking out would be from this coil, or this, you draw a straight line down from this, the end of this coil. So this to this point would be 1 coil. So to match the front, I took out 3 coils. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 to right here. So I already have it marked over here. The same thing from this lip right here of the dead coil. So 1, 2, 3 coils. Here's a quick tip to get the springs back seated once they're in the car. Reassembly is exactly the same as when you took it apart, just backwards. Make sure you put your little stud here with plate back down through the spring, spear it through the hole, vice grip the plate down right here like I had it before, and then tighten up the nut, and that tightens the spring down onto the perch. And then once you have both sides done, the trick to getting the springs in the uppers is to jack up the rear real slow, and as you're going up real slow, reach up in here, and the perches are up there at the top. Just push back on the spring and guide the spring onto the perch. And then once you're all the way up, since we jacked the car up by the body, you got to go up by the rear the whole way, so the springs will sit down on the perches. You can keep jacking up, pull out your jack stands from under the body, and then drop the car, and the springs will stay perfectly in the perches. Here's the final result of the rear springs being cut down. It matches the front now. I usually gauge these by the body molding on the side, the trim line. The trim line's nice and even. I know that it's evenly dropped because the wheel arches aren't even in the front and the back. But it's low now. The jack got stuck under it. We had to rock and lift it off the jack stands. So that's 3 coils out of the rear and 3 coils out of the front. And it still has clearance in the wheel well to the tire. Just barely.